With all of our attention focused on what was happening in California and then the run-up to No King's Day and Trump's complete and utter failure of a military birthday parade, you may have missed some really good news from last week. Things can feel very big and scary and overwhelming, and it's important for us to be checking the facts and to be making an intentional, conscious choice to go and seek out the ways that we are winning, the ways that we are actively resisting Trump, the way that democracy is functioning. Because the Trump regime wants to suppress all of that good news, right? And we know how much of corporate legacy media is in the pocket of Trump right now, or at the very least, they're appeasing him. They don't want to tick him off. They don't want to cover things that make him upset. They are minimizing good news so that they don't draw his ire. And not only for our own morale, but just so that we have an accurate picture of what's happening in this country, we need to go seek out those stories, those moments of success, those positive things that are happening, because they're happening like on a daily basis. A while ago, one of my mutuals, Charlotte in France, said, they're trying to shock and awe us. We need to shock and awe them right back. We need to flood the zone with all of the good things that we are doing to resist fascism. And I think along with that is making sure that we flood the zone with news of when democracy is functioning as it should. I'm sorry, my tiny dog is barking in the background. So this past week, there were special elections all around the country. There are special elections happening all the time. On June 10th, there were a whole gaggle of special elections in Oklahoma, in Florida, and Massachusetts. And Democrats outperformed in 5 of the 6 races. It can be really easy for us to focus very much on a federal level, on Congress and on the White House, and we can tend to forget that democracy really happens on a state and local level. That's where we have the greatest sphere of influence. That's where we can have the biggest impact. And it's where people often forget to vote. It's where voter turnout is low. And MAGA, Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, they have all been exploiting that for literally decades. They have been working to infiltrate state and local politics and get their folks in positions of power and influence so that they could implement their god-awful, repressive, horrible agenda. And we're seeing how that has worked very well for them. Democrats have not really planned strategically. In fact, there's a lot of districts where Democrats don't even run an opposition candidate. They've just kind of ceded the ground like, okay, well, this is a Republican district. We're not going to put any money here. We're not going to support a candidate. We're just going to do nothing. We're going to kind of give up. And we see Republicans running unopposed in a lot of places. And we got to stop that right now. If you are interested in running for your local or state office, go for it. Now is the time to get into politics. Now is the time to be like, maybe I have something to get back to my community. Maybe I can represent my neighbors. I can represent my neighborhood. I can do right by the folks in my community. Maybe it's time for me to step up and run for office. And if you can't run for office, then you definitely need to be supporting candidates who are progressive candidates who are willing to do so. I want to look at Oklahoma specifically. I'm always watching what's happening there because that's where my husband's tribe is located, and the way that the Christo-fascists have absolutely taken over the government in Oklahoma and are using Oklahoma as like a testing ground for a lot of Project 2025 has been really frightening. I worry constantly for the good people of Oklahoma and the horrible, oppressive, unconstitutional, immoral, cruel things that Republicans in Oklahoma are doing. And I think honestly, Oklahomans are also getting fed up with it. So when we look at these special elections, we really want to focus on what happened in Oklahoma. According to the down ballot from June 10th, an Oklahoma Democrat racked up a 50-point overperformance in a massive landslide victory. Democrat Amanda Clinton, a public relations consultant and a member of the Cherokee Nation, cruised to a 69-point landslide over her Republican opponent. Now, Tulsa is generally considered a red state, although we know there's really no such thing as red and blue states. There's really no such thing as red states at all. There's just gerrymandered purple ones. The district where Amanda Clinton is from went plus 19 for Kamala Harris, so it was a blue district. So you would expect her to perform about as well, and you would expect a low turnout in a special election. She beat Kamala Harris's margin by 50 points. That's a huge, huge overperformance. This is a massive victory, not only for the Oklahoma State Legislature, but also just in general when we are looking at the way the winds are blowing. We're looking at the trends. We're seeing Democratic candidates win over and over by huge margins. And in heavily Republican districts, we are seeing Democratic candidates make very large leaps. Maybe they aren't winning, but they are closing the gap significantly in a way that you would absolutely not expect if people thought that Donald Trump and the Republicans in the House and Senate were doing a good job. All of these losses that we're seeing, either outright losses for the Republicans, or we're seeing the closing of the gap, all of that is a resounding condemnation of Republicans in the House and the Senate and of Donald Trump. People are saying Republicans are fucking it up. We do not want them. We don't want what they're about. We are absolutely opposed. And more than that, you are seeing a complete reversal of the kind of apathy that we saw in the 2024 election, where Democrats had low turnout, right? We know that a significant reason that Kamala lost was that a lot of people didn't show up and vote. Now, whether that's because they couldn't bother to vote, they had voter apathy, or whether it's because they were experiencing active voter suppression and it was really difficult for them to get to the polls and they couldn't overcome that hurdle. But both of those things were at play. I don't want to make it sound like everybody who didn't vote was somebody who just couldn't be bothered and was apathetic. And it's, it's far, far more complicated than that, especially when you look at red states and the way that voter suppression is implemented by the Republicans. But what we're seeing is that Democrats are now motivated. They are showing up in big numbers. We are seeing Democratic candidates consistently outperform Kamala Harris by a significant margin. And this 50-point leap, 69% of the vote, 50 points up over Kamala Harris, that's huge, huge for Representative Clinton. And when we're talking about overperformances and the closing of that gap, right? Places that are very, very solidly red, and you don't expect Democrats to do very well, you don't expect Democratic voters to turn out. In all of these races, we are seeing Democrats closing the gap. That means Democratic turnout is high, and it means that people are not super thrilled about the Republican candidates. You should not be expecting giant Democratic gains in very, very red districts if the voters are approving of what Donald Trump and the Republicans who are controlling the House and the Senate are doing. So the down ballot says Democrats turned in overperformances in 4 Republican-held districts, including the 74th House District in Oklahoma and 3 races in Florida. We're looking at double-digit gains in all of those places. Overall, in 29 special elections so far this year, Democratic candidates have run 16.4 points ahead of the presidential election in 2024. So what does this mean? What is the takeaway for us? One, Republicans are in big trouble. Going into the midterms, this is terrible. This is really, really bad for them, that already people are this pissed off at Trump and the Republicans. They are this galvanized to get to the polls. They are not willing to let voter suppression deter them. Even in very, very red districts, Democrats are showing up in force. And that Democrats are far more motivated to vote right now than they were in 2024, 16.4% ahead of where these districts were polling for Kamala Harris. Really, really bad news for the Republicans. I also want folks to understand that this is evidence that democracy is working. I know I've made a lot of content talking about folks who are so convinced that elections don't work, that the elections are rigged, that there's no point in voting. If that were true, remember, elections are controlled by the states, not the federal government. If that were true, then how is it that a Democrat just won 69% of the vote, an overwhelming victory in a very, very red gerrymandered state? How is it that in a deeply Republican state that is considered the testing ground for a lot of what Project 2025 is doing, how is it that a Democrat was able to win if voting is pointless and elections are all rigged? This is really good news on multiple fronts. It's more important than ever that we get out the vote, that we all show up. We must exercise our obligation as citizens of this country to do our civic duty and vote. And I think, if anything, this should give you a significant measure of optimism. This is really, really good news. Y'all should be very pleased. I know I'm very pleased.